What's up, y'all? My name is Dontavious Hill, three-time Team USA high jumper, five-time NCAA All-American, currently with a personal best of 7 feet 5 inches. And today, I'll be talking to you guys about why you should not be sinking down in the high jump, right? And when I say sinking down, I'm referring to right in the penultimate step or right in those last 1 to 2 steps when an athlete kind of sinks down their body and gets ready to prepare for the jump. Now, this is very common in power jumpers. So basically an athlete who kind of swings their leg through and drives the knee versus a speed jumper, right? But it also happens in speed jumpers as well. And all athletes must understand that if you ever want to be great in the high jump and reach the highest heights that you can actually reach, we cannot afford to sink down and give away inches, right? So I'm going to draw a demonstration for you guys so you can understand what's actually happening when you are sinking down in the high jump, okay? So right here, we have a bar, right? And let's just say this bar is, let's call this bar 6 feet, okay? And let's just say we have an athlete. Let's draw a ground here. So we have an athlete here. He's about 6 feet tall, right? That's about the average height of most young men, right? So he's about 6 feet tall. The bar is at 6 feet. And as a high jumper, in order to maximize his ability to jump over the highest bar that he can jump over, it would be great if he could remain 6 feet tall, right? Of course it would. But what happens for most jumpers is we kind of sink down going into the penultimate and takeoff. And guess what? We're no longer 6 feet. We're about 5'8". So now we're at about 5 feet 8 inches tall. Now we're about 6 feet. And we were 6 feet. So when we decide to approach a bar and attack a bar, when we go into sink down, we lower our hip height, which means by the time we get ready to go up and jump and clear this bar, we've basically and evidently nerfed ourselves. We've suppressed our overall ability by forcing ourselves to be lower to the ground, right? So which athlete do you think is going to jump higher? It's a pretty easy answer to, if you would think about it, because a lot of people will always say, well, you have to be tall in the high jump, or it's better to be tall. Like, to an extent, height matters in the high jump. Only to an extent. Height is not the end all be all of being a great high jumper. There were great high jumpers who were 5'11", jumping over 7 feet 10 and a half inches. 6 feet jumping 7'10", 7'11". So that is not the end all be all of being a great high jumper, right? But one thing those high jumpers made sure they did, they had to do, they made sure to maximize every inch of their height they had. They had to. They cannot afford to be sinking down at takeoff and giving away another 3-4 inches off of their height. That's 3 or 4 inches they would not be in the air. So for us young high jumpers out there, when we're coming through our takeoff, when we get ready to jump, let's try and stay tall through the hips the entire way. We don't want to have a time where we sink down, right? We don't want to have that time when we sink down, right? So this is our example of what kind of happens when we sink down. Because when you're 6 feet, and when you're 6 feet, you go and sink down into a penultimate, you're now 5'8", right? Now let's give an example of what happens when we stay tall. Okay, so we're gonna leave the bar here. Now, let's just pretend this athlete is 6'2". So we just drew another athlete. We still have our bar here. This is what can happen when you decide to stay tall as you're approaching a high jump bar. When you get taller through the hips. I don't know if you guys have ever seen, so I'm sure every young person or athlete has experienced this at one point in their life. When you go to get a physical at the doctor and you have to stand on the scale and they get to measure your height. I know when I was younger, I would just try and get as tall as I can and try and just stretch my body up and just try to get an extra inch or two so that I can be taller and feel taller. That's the same thing that you can do in the high jump when you stay tall through your approach. You're changing. You may not be able to, genetically change your anatomy, but you're physically changing what's happening, right? You're physically changing it. So when you think about this on a large scale, right? You were born 6 feet, but the way that you're approaching this high jump bar can determine whether you end up 5'8" at takeoff or 6'2" at takeoff. Where would you want to be to maximize your height? And let's think about the overall height difference of this, right? This is 6 inches of difference. From here to here, that's 6 inches. The difference between sinking down at the takeoff versus the difference between staying tall at the takeoff and pushing through the hips and trying to be up as upright as you possibly can is another 6 inches. So some people are like, oh, wow. Or some people are like, oh, well, I don't even think that matters. I got to sink down so I can get my power. This is how someone who is 6 feet tall can jump 6'6" or 6'8", 6'10", 7 feet. I'm like 6'2". My PR is 7'5". Because of body positions, understanding of the approach, and things like this. This is a 6-inch difference. And this can show you how an athlete can be the difference between jumping 6 feet versus jumping a 6'6" bar because of something like this, right? So when we look at this and we think about it, we do not want to be here. As a great high jumper, you can end up in this range. But when you learn to actually get tall and stay tall through the hips as you're approaching the bar, as you're high jumping, as you're attacking, we can get to this range. Okay? So let's kind of think about what this does for us as we're going over the bar, right? So as a high jumper, if you understand the concept of being tall when you're leaving the ground, you must know, right, that when you are above the bar, when you actually take off, that's going to cause a bigger jump. That's going to cause more height off of the ground. Earlier, I did explain that now we can see how an athlete jumps 6'6", but the reason being is the one that's attempting 5'8", or the one that's sinking down to being 5'8", even though they're 6 feet tall. Let's just say he can get up and he can pretty much clear the 6 feet bar here, right? He can pretty much clear the 6 feet bar, right? Which is good for some people, right? But if you want to be better than that, right? This is the same athlete right here, but he gets up and he can clear this, the 6'6". Same athlete, same height. What did he do differently? He stayed tall and then sink down through his takeoff. But what most people think is they say, oh, he's just stronger. Oh, he's just more athletic. Oh, well, he just born with it. Like, that's not it, right? To an extent, there are some people who can just naturally jump higher than others. But when you're talking about becoming a great high jumper, there are things that can be overcome with technical fixes. Take it from me, my PR in high jump was 4'8" when I was 15. And when I was 16, it was 5'10". When I was 17, it was 6'3". By the time I was 18, it was 7 feet. And I did not get it was not because, oh, he just got it. He just no. I was pretty much one of the most unathletic kids you would ever met in your life growing up. But I was able to improve myself in the high jump through learning the event, learning technical analysis, learning how to lean in the curve, learning how to stay tall at takeoff to make me no longer 5 feet 8 inches at takeoff, to not even make me 6 feet, the height I was born with, to make me 6'2", which allowed me to get another 6 inches in the high jump, which can allow an athlete to jump this much higher based off of the position they're putting themselves in on the ground. If you've ever seen someone when they high jump, they just take this big, wide, long step and they get really low into the takeoff and they get ready to jump. Oh, you better watch out, because that person won't be jumping. That person is going to peak. That person is going to reach their maximum height. But if you ever see an athlete with a really smooth approach and they're running off of that takeoff and they're staying tall, I don't care if they jump in 5 feet. One day, that athlete is going to be really good because they understand positions. That's why I was able to be jumping at 4'8" and be confident, because people say, I look good going over the bar. I look good jumping. And I kept my same technique and I was able to continuously improve it. And by the time I was jumping much higher, it wasn't nothing that I did differently in the weight room at the time. Like, I was 15. I was 15 years old. It was only as strong as I was going to get. 16, I can only get so strong, right? What happened was a change in the approach, a change in staying tall. Stay tall. Stay tall through the takeoff. Do not sink down. When you sink down, we give away inches. And what people may think they're giving away, it's just another inch. It could be a difference between, winning state and not even qualifying for state. Getting on the scholarship radar and never ever seeing a college campus. That's what the difference of this kind of thing can do for you guys, right? So when we're high jumping, let's make sure we're staying tall the entire way. Let's make sure at takeoff, when we get into our penultimate, let's learn how to go through our penultimate in our last 2 steps without trying to power up, without trying to sink down, without taking 2 big, long strides, okay? And when you do that, you're going to be able to jump higher bars as you practice it and practice it. If you're the parent of a high school high jumper who struggles with technical things like staying tall, I want to help you guys out. Let's hop on a strategy call so I can help you guys critique that film and see where they're actually making those mistakes in their technique. We'll then craft a personalized plan to help them overcome any of the problems that they're currently facing so they can actually jump higher bars. So if you want to help your athlete overcome those things that they're currently facing, make sure to book a call with me down below in the description so we can get your athlete the help that they need.